Oh boy. So after you guys saw the P51 video, you asked me to do the same kind of stat comparison for the F4U4 Corsairs that are coming out in the next patch. And whilst I initially didn't really want to do it, I eventually just gave in and went over the datasheets, and I did comparisons between the P51H, the F4U4 and the F4U4B. And something strange came up for the F4U4B. Despite having more horsepower than the F4U4, on war emergency power it's actually worse? Not just in a small amount, it's substantially worse. But you'll have to see the rest of the video to find out what exactly is worse and why it is worse, because I think I know exactly what's wrong with that thing. But first, it's time for a sponsor. Today's sponsor is the free Eagles app for War Thunder. Download the app and use the code shown on the screen for 10 free golden eagles right now. Hello you sexy beasts, and welcome back to War Thunder, and welcome to the preview of the F4U4 and the F4U4B Corsairs. Two new fighters for the American naval line. Let's not lose too much time, let's go straight into the general characteristics of each aircraft. Starting off with the F4U4, this is a battle rating 5.7 fighter, equipped with 6 M250 caliber machine guns with total ammunition load of 2,350 rounds. Interestingly, on the dev server they did have the early war belt, so no APIT shells. This might change until the patch drops, I am not sure, although it might not change at all. Now the armament isn't really what makes this aircraft so special. It's actually a couple of different things. Mainly, and this is going to be something that sim pilots very much will like, is the cockpit visibility is much better to the rear in both this wing and the 4B. It's actually really quite nice. You can actually see something behind you. But the main star of this aircraft is the engine. It's equipped with the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp 18W 18-cylinder radial engine, which has an output of 2,100 horsepower on 100% throttle. This, when you compare it to, for example, the P51H, is substantially more. But that is not where it stops. No, in fact, with war emergency power on 60 inches of mercury of boost, if I'm not mistaken, the F4U4 can reach up to 2,450 horsepower, and the F4U4B, which has 70 inches of mercury of boosts, can reach up to 2,650 horsepower. That is massive. Now, of course, this is also going to be compensated by the weight of the aircraft. Unlike the P51H, which is surprisingly lightweight, the F4U4 doesn't have the luxury. 4,158 kilograms for both variants on empty, 5,638 kilograms for the F4U4 and 5,749 kilograms for the F4U4B on normal weights, and finally 7,330 kilograms for both aircraft on maximum takeoff weight. This is with fuel tanks, bombs, everything. As such, you can see this thing is a heavy bastard. Now the question is, does the horsepower rating actually compensate for the weight of the aircraft? And to some extent it does. In fact, at 100% horsepower, the F4U4 actually has a higher power to weight ratio than the P51H. This is actually quite nice. 372 horsepower per ton on the F4U4, 365 horsepower per ton on the F4U4B, given that the aircraft is slightly heavier on the normal weight, and as such it's actually pretty much equal up with the P51H. Now, of course, the P51H has the massive advantage of having massive amounts of boosts. So when you do apply web to both aircraft, you see that the difference is actually quite significant. 518 horsepower per ton on the P51H, whereas the F4U4 only has 435 horsepower per ton, and the F4U4B actually pulls ahead. Despite being a heavy aircraft, the extra 200 horsepower on web actually do pull it ahead on 461 horsepower per ton. Now here is where the discrepancies start. You see, the F4U4B is a heavy aircraft due to the 4 20mm M3 cannons that it carries. However, it also makes up for that with extra horsepower on war emergency power. And looking at the power to weight ratio figures here, you would expect the F4U4B to be pretty much on equal terms when it comes to climb rate, at least at 100%, and pulling ahead of the F4U4 in both climb rate and top speed. However, it just doesn't. We're actually going to look at the climb rate first this time around. By the way, before I forget, these are the official datasheets. You will find the sources in the description, as you always do, so you can check out these stats yourself. I'm simply reading the stats and doing the comparison, and this is very weird. So, first of all, to note here is that the time to altitude for the P51H was taken at 275 km/h indicated airspeed, whilst for the F4U4 variants it was taken at 260 km/h indicated airspeed. So there's a slight difference there. However, between the P51H and the F4U4, the comparison actually makes a lot of sense. Now, despite the F4U4 having a higher power-to-weight ratio on 100% than the P51H does, it doesn't climb quite as well. The weight just is too much for even the engine to handle. As such, you can see that the F4U4 falls slightly behind the P51H in terms of climb rate. As is to be expected, the P51H is a monster of an aircraft. And the same thing happens for the F4U4B. Again, at 100% it doesn't get the bonus of the extra 200 horsepower, and given that this is a slightly heavier aircraft than the F4U4, it also climbs slightly worse. However, where things make absolutely no sense is in the top speed of these aircraft. You see, weight generally doesn't affect the top speed of an aircraft. There is an argument to be made that an aircraft with a heavier weight has to have a higher angle of attack in order to keep itself in the air, which can cause a little bit more of a drag. And not even trying to argue here that the F4U4 should be faster than P51, given that the F4U has a radial engine, which creates a lot more drag. So, as expected, the F4U4 is slower than the P51. That's not what I'm trying to argue here. What I am trying to warn you of is the F4U4B. Keep in mind, these aircraft are essentially the same except for the armament. And at 100% they have exactly the same horsepower output. However, the F4U4B is substantially slower. At sea level, for example, the F4U4 does 593 km/h, whereas the F4U4B only does 565. That is a massive difference actually. But okay, let's pretend that the heavier weight would make that much of a difference, even though the weight is only like 150 kilograms of that in difference. Let's pretend the weight is causing all that. Certainly the extra horsepower of the F4U4B on war emergency power should more than make up for that. We even saw earlier that the power to weight ratio is higher than on the F4U4. But once again, that is not the case, and in fact it gets even worse. Despite having 200 extra horsepower, it is always slower than the F4U4. And it doesn't make any sense. In fact, even according to the official datasheet, at 7,000 and 9,000 meters, there's no difference between using war emergency power or not in terms of top speed. Which makes no goddamn sense. But okay, we're going to try and figure out what's wrong in a bit. Let's go over the rest of the stats first. Wing loading is actually a surprise. Despite being such a heavy aircraft, the F4U4 does have a very high wing area, and surprisingly the F4U4 actually has a lower wing loading than the P51H. Also curiously, the F4U4B just has enough normal weight to actually have exactly the same wing loading as the P51H does. And this somewhat reflects in turning ability as well. On 100%, the P51H, the F4U4 and the F4U4B have exactly the same 21-second sustained turn time. However, this all changes with war emergency power. Once again, the P51H takes the crown with its massive boost, giving it a 19-second turn time, whereas the F4U4 has a 20-second turn time, and the F4U4B doesn't change at all. It doesn't matter if you're using web or not, you're going to turn the same way at 21 seconds. Finally, I'll give you the table of the flap maximum break-off speeds. You can see it there. P51 again has massively strong combat flaps that can hold up to 650 km/h, whereas both F4U variants have 380 km/h maximum speed for the combat flaps, 278 for the takeoff flaps, and 250 for the landing flaps. Also curiously, all three aircraft share the same red line, making them all very great at diving. But I'm not quite over what is happening with the top speeds here. It makes absolutely no sense why the F4U4B should have a worse top speed than the F4U4 on war emergency power, given that it has 200 more horsepower and a better power to weight ratio. So I took a glance over my footage and I found something interesting. Can you see on this image what is wrong? Those are pylons. Either for bombs or for rockets. I think they are for rockets, I'm not sure. The thing is, I didn't take any ordnance in this match. Those are permanent pylons that come with the aircraft. From the get-go. It doesn't matter if you're taking ordnance or not, those pylons will be attached to the F4U4B. And they have a massive impact on the flight performance of this aircraft. They both add weight, on top of the weight that you're already getting from the 20mm cannons, as well as adding massive amounts of drag, which would explain why the top speed is so atrocious. Now here's the thing, this wouldn't really be a problem if both aircraft had similar battle ratings, but they do not. The F4U4 sits at a battle rating of 5.7 and is most likely going to be released at 5.7 as well. And honestly, I can fully recommend the F4U4. It's never going to be as strong as the P51H, as it shouldn't. Honestly, the P51H is going to club this patch. But the F4U4 is a very strong aircraft in its own right, so I can fully recommend it. It's great, it flies great. The F4U4B, however, has a battle rating of 6.3. This is 2 BR steps higher than the other variant. And this all for getting the M3 20mm cannons. But not only does it have a higher battle rating, it has a lower performance because of the pylons. So to finalize this stat overview and give my final conclusions, I'm actually glad that we are finally getting more F4U variants. I've always been in love with the Corsairs, but I've just kind of gotten over the lower tier variants that weren't really... They are good aircraft, but stuff like the F1C just isn't all that great. And given that I like playing American aircraft in simulator mode and the Corsairs have an absolutely horrible cockpit, it's also a very welcome change for me to see that you can actually see out of your cockpit with the F4U4. However, I can really only recommend you getting one of them. The F4U4 is a great aircraft. The F4U4B, I simply cannot recommend it to you. There's actually no sense in going for it. The M3 cannons might be good, but it's simply too much of a trade-off getting those cannons when you have to pay with a high battle rating and a worse performance. Anyways lads, hopefully you have enjoyed this stat preview of the F4U4 Corsair variants coming in patch 1.71. As always, you can find the sources in the description down below. I'll link all the official datasheets so you can compare and verify all the data yourself. Patch 1.71 should be just around the corner. I am expecting it to come either tomorrow or on Thursday. And I also have a feeling that I will have to make a rant, because it doesn't seem like they're actually changing the battle ratings for either the MBTs coming to ground forces or the P51H coming to air forces. This is... oh boy. This patch is going to break a lot of stuff, let's just say that. We'll see if I can do another video. I do have a lot of footage recorded of the Kampfpanzer 70, but depending on when the patch goes live, I'm not sure if it's even worth it doing a video on that. If the patch is just going to drop on the same day, we'll see. Let me know what you guys want to see in the comments down below, essentially. And it's about time I stop rambling, so like this video if you did, subscribe if you're new around here, I haven't done that outro in a while. And as always lads, my name's been MikeGoesBoom, and thank you for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines, with your shattered frame of mind. Instead you could always stay, we can wait right here and play, until somehow you can find